The emergency room at Riverside General never truly quieted. Monitors beeped in rhythmic patterns. Shoes squeaked against polished tile. Someone called for labs, and the words bounced off glass walls before dissolving into the hum of fluorescent lights. The automatic doors slid open. The sound thinned. Marcus Blackwell walked in, wearing a suit too expensive for an ER and a stare that didn't blink. His lapel pin read CEO in small polished letters. He stopped at the nurse's station and fixed his eyes on the staff like a man who had never been told no. "Who touched the VIP chart?" His voice cut through the noise. Nobody answered. A resident froze with a tablet in hand. An orderly held a gurney halfway through a turn and simply stood there. Behind the desk, Elena Thorne kept sorting IV kits, one sealed packet after another, her movements precise and unhurried. When Blackwell's shadow fell over her, she looked up without hurry. Blackwell leaned in. "My board is getting calls," he said. "Start talking." Elena's voice stayed even. "Sir, the order was entered under the wrong patient profile. It was corrected within minutes. The patient was not harmed." A second passed. Blackwell's jaw tightened. His hand rose fast. The slap cracked down the corridor. A metal tray slipped from someone's fingers and screeched across the floor. An overhead mic was still live and carried that sound into nearby halls. Elena did not flinch. She did not step back. She stood exactly where she was. Heat spread across her cheek, then darkened. A single tear traced a clean line through the flush, quiet and uninvited. "You're suspended," Blackwell said, pointing at the doors. "Get out." A veteran physician near the wall stared at Elena's face, then at Blackwell's hand, and spoke under his breath. He picked the wrong person. Phones lifted. The room waited for Elena to break. Somewhere in triage, a child started crying, then stopped when her mother hushed her. Even the vending machine seemed loud, its motor humming as if afraid to interrupt anything. She did not break. Elena pressed two fingers to her cheek, testing the bruise with clinical precision. Her sleeve lifted for a heartbeat, revealing a faded fabric band on her wrist. Numbers stitched into it like coordinates. She pulled the sleeve down, turned back to the supply cart, and glanced toward the ambulance bay where sirens were growing louder. The screen faded to black. White text appeared 72 hours earlier. The night shift at Riverside General moved like a river, constant, dark and full of things you couldn't see until they surfaced. Elena Thorne moved through it like a current no one noticed until something needed saving. She was 32 years old, though most people assumed older because of the way she carried silence. Her scrubs were navy blue clean, but worn at the cuffs. Her hair was pulled back tight enough to hurt, but she never touched it. Her eyes were gray, the kind that looked through people instead of at them. The ER staff called her the ghost. Not to her face. Never to her face. She arrived at 11 p.m., clocked in without speaking to anyone, and went straight to the supply closet. She restocked with the precision of someone who had done it 1,000 times in the dark. Gauze, tape, saline flushes, tourniquets. She touched each item once, confirmed it was sealed, and placed it exactly where it needed to be. Grace Brennan, the charge nurse, watched from the doorway. Grace was 58, broad-shouldered, and had survived 3 hospital mergers by refusing to care what administrators thought. She had kind eyes and a voice that could stop a code team mid-panic. "You're early again," Grace said. Elena didn't look up. "Quiet night." "Never is." Grace stepped closer. "You sleep at all?" Elena's hands paused for half a second. "Enough!" Grace didn't believe her, but she didn't push. "You didn't push Elena Thorne. You just stood near her and hoped she'd let you in someday." The ambulance bay doors burst open. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust. A paramedic jogged beside a gurney, his hand on the ambu bag, pumping with a rhythm that gave away his fear. 23-year-old male found unresponsive in a gas station bathroom, the paramedic called out. "Needle on scene, pulse thready, pupils, pinpoint. We gave Narcan twice. Minimal response, pressures crashing." Elena was already at the head of the gurney, fingers at the carotid, counting, without looking like she was counting. Her voice stayed low. "Airway, set up suction. Get a second AV line." A young resident rushed in, nearly colliding with the gurney. "She's just a floor nurse," he blurted like it was a diagnosis. Grace's eyes flicked to him, then back to Elena. "Then go be useful somewhere else, doctor, or pick up that monitor." The resident swallowed, grabbed the leads, and began attaching them with shaking hands. Elena did not look at anyone's face longer than necessary. Her attention was on the slack jaw, the shallow breaths, the vein that disappeared when the blood pressure fell. 2 milligrams Narcan ready, a nurse called. "Give it," Elena said. The patient jerked a sudden, violent inhale. His eyes snapped open with pure animal alarm. His body bucked against the strap's strength, returning faster than sense. Easy, Elena said, still at his head. You're safe, you're in the hospital. He fought harder, thrashing, trying to tear the line from his arm. A monitor alarm screamed as his heart rate spiked. The resident flinched back, hands raised as if the man's panic were contagious. Grace barked for security, then caught herself. She watched Elena instead. Elena's hands settled on the patient's forearm. Not gripping, not forcing, just anchoring. Her tone did not rise. Breathe with me, she said. In, out, slow. The man's eyes rolled wild and glassy. He spat a curse and lunged again. Elena's fingers shifted precise 2 inches down, a pressure that made his muscles pause for a fraction of a second, long enough for oxygen to get in. The pause looked like luck to anyone who had never learned how to touch a body without provoking it. Elena used that sliver of time to reset the mask, to align the airway, to bring the room back from the edge. Grace stepped in with a strap and locked it down. The team moved again, the patient's breathing smoothed. His eyelids fluttered. The monitor eased its pitch. Elena finally stepped back. She wiped her palms on her scrub pants, not because they were dirty, but because she always did after a surge, like closing a book. The resident stared at her. How did you do that? Elena adjusted the IV pump settings with the same calm she used to set a tray. He needed an anchor, not a fight. But where did you learn? It doesn't matter. Elena turned and walked back to the supply cart, her steps even heel to toe, as if the floor had marks only she could see. Grace followed her with her eyes, then looked at the resident. You just saw 10 years of experience in 10 seconds, Grace said quietly. Pay attention. The resident opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Elena's back, at the way she moved through chaos, like it was choreography she'd memorized long ago. In the break room later that night, 2 young doctors sat with coffee that had gone cold. The television played a news segment on mute. One of them flicked a napkin at the trash and missed. Thorn's too soft for trauma, he said. You need granite in the ER, not silk. The other snorted. She takes things personal, makes you slow. Grace stood by the counter, stirring coffee she wasn't going to drink. She set the spoon down with a clink that was too sharp for the room. You all talk like you're invincible, she said. The first doctor shrugged. It's the ER. You either harden up or you leave. Grace leaned forward just enough to make the conversation feel smaller. I've watched Elena Thorne hold a screaming addict still with a whisper, she said. I've watched her triage a hallway of bodies and never pick the wrong one. You confuse quiet with weak. That's your mistake. The room went awkward. Someone checked their phone, pretending not to listen. Grace turned and walked out, coffee untouched. Elena did not join them. She never did. She ate standing up by a supply alcove, a few bites of something bland between calls. When she had a spare minute, she pulled a small notebook from her pocket and opened it. Not to write gossip or schedules, to sketch lines, branches, a map of nerves and vessels, as if she were preparing for a fight that required more than muscle. A new nurse, barely out of school, noticed the notebook and drifted closer. That's anatomy, she said, surprised. Elena kept her pencil moving. It helps me stay ready. For what? Elena looked up briefly. Her eyes were calm, but there was something in them that didn't belong to fluorescent lights. For the part where people panic, she said, then returned to her drawing. Later, just before dawn, a transport intern named Caleb rushed in with a chart pressed to his chest and sweat on his upper lip. He was the kind of eager that got people hurt. I think I messed up, he said, voice a-cracking. I moved the wrong chart into the wrong rack. Dr. Ashford is going to kill me. Elena took the chart from him and scanned it in 3 seconds. Her thumb found the error. The patient name didn't match the wristband number. It was small, ordinary, the sort of mistake that could cascade into something ugly if left alone. She handed it back. Fix it, she said. Caleb swallowed. They'll write me up. Elena's gaze stayed on the hallway, on the stream of gurneys and footsteps. Then you'll learn from it, she replied. But you fix it first. He hesitated. Are you going to tell Grace? Elena shook her head once. Not if you correct it. Caleb blinked at her, surprised by mercy. He nodded hard and hurried off. By the time the sun began to turn the windows pale, Elena's world had found its rhythm again. Chaos managed, Liv steadied. Another shift nearly done. She walked to the locker room, peeled off her scrubs, and changed into street clothes, jeans, a gray jacket, boots worn smooth at the heels. She tied her hair into a loose knot and looked at herself in the mirror for exactly 2 seconds. The bruise hadn't formed yet. That would come later. She left through the side entrance, avoiding the main lobby, where the morning shift was arriving with loud voices and fresh energy. The parking lot was still damp from last night's rain. The air smelled like oil and wet concrete. Her apartment was on the second floor of a plain building 3 miles from the hospital. No decorations in the hallway, no welcome mat. Inside, everything was orderly, almost sterile. The counters were clear, the sink was drywall. There were no photos on the walls, no frames on the shelves, no clutter that suggested a past worth displaying. Elena set her keys in the same spot by the door. She washed her hands for a full count, scrubbing under her nails until the water ran colder. She changed out of her street clothes and folded them, not tossing them into a heap, then placed them in a basket with the same precision she used in the supply room. In the bedroom closet behind a row of plain shirts, she pulled out a small wooden box. It was old corners, worn smooth, the surface scratched like it had traveled. A dial lock sat on the front, numbers faint from use. Elena's fingers turned the dial with practiced certainty. Click. The lid opened. Inside, velvet lining held a few objects that didn't belong to the life she lived on paper. A charred fabric patch, edges darkened, as if kissed by fire, embroidered with a crimson bird and the words Crimson Phoenix. A faded photograph folded at the creases, figures in dusty uniforms, standing close together, faces half lost in shadow. 12 people. A desert backdrop, mountains in the distance. A tarnished silver cross engraved with a single date, September 16th, 2014. Elena did not take the photograph out. She did not stare at it like a memory. She touched the patch, once thumb brushing the burned edge, then let her hand rest on the cross for a heartbeat, as if checking that it was still real. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A message preview flashed and vanished. Another buzz followed, then another, rapid enough to feel like a pulse. Elena did not pick it up. She closed the box, turned the dial, and slid it back into the closet. Then she stood in the quiet of her apartment, listening to the distant hum of the city and the closer, steadier sound of her own breathing, until the buzzing stopped and the silence returned. She slept for 3 hours with her phone face down on the counter, as if the screen itself could spill something into the room. When Elena woke, the bruise on her cheek had not yet formed. That would come tonight. But the day already felt wrong, the way a storm feels wrong before the first crack of thunder. She showered, ate half a piece of toast, and dressed in clean scrubs. The drive to Riverside General felt shorter than it should have. The morning light was pale and cold, the kind that made everything look washed out. At the employee entrance, the security guard, Owen Garrett, 55, with tired eyes and a limp from an old knee injury, nodded at her. "Morning, Thorne." Elena nodded back. She didn't waste words on pleasantries. Owen appreciated that. Inside, the hospital smelled like coffee, disinfectant, and exhaustion. The day shift was in full swing. Doctors moved with the false confidence of people who'd had sleep. Nurses clustered at the station, their voices bright and sharp. Elena slipped past them, invisible by choice. Grace caught her near the medroom. "You look tired." "I'm fine." Grace's eyes narrowed. "You keep saying that." Elena didn't answer. She pulled a fresh pair of gloves from the box and kept moving. The morning passed in the usual rhythm. A child with asthma, an old man with crushing chest pain, a woman who arrived sobbing, then went silent when Elena held her hand long enough for the tremors to ease. Then at 2 p.m. the rhythm broke. Senator William Harrington arrived by private ambulance. 70 years old, white hair combed perfectly, even in crisis, a face that had smiled through 1,000 campaign ads. He was pale, sweating, complaining of chest pain and dizziness. The ER shifted into a different gear. Administrators appeared. Phones rang. Someone whispered VIP like it was a diagnosis. Dr. Graham Ashford, the trauma director, took charge. He was 48, tall, broad-shouldered, hair combed with the precision of a man who believed appearance mattered in medicine. He barked orders and residents scrambled. Elena stayed at the periphery, restocking a crash cart, listening. The order came through: aspirin, nitroglycerin, beta blocker. Standard protocol for suspected MI. But something was wrong. Elena glanced at the monitor. The patient profile on the screen didn't match the wristband. The dosage was calculated for a 70-year-old, but the profile said 85. The allergy list was different. The medication history was different. She moved closer, keeping her voice low. "Dr. Ashford, the profile." "Not now, Thorne." "Sir, the patient ID doesn't match." "I said not now." Elena's jaw tightened. She looked at the resident preparing the medication. Jake Drummond, 28, fresh out of school, eager to impress. He hadn't noticed the mismatch. Elena stepped between him and the IV port. "Stop," Jake blinked. "Excuse me. The profile is wrong. Check the wristband." Jake looked at Dr. Ashford, then back at Elena. "She's just a floor nurse," he said like it explained everything. Elena's voice stayed calm. "The wristband says Harrington William J. The profile says Harrington William R. Different patient, different allergies. If you push that med, you could kill him. The room went quiet. Dr. Ashford snatched the tablet, his face going red then white. He stared at the screen, then at the wristband, then back at the screen. Jesus Christ, he whispered. He turned to Jake. How did this happen? Jake's eyes went wide. I just pulled the phone that was flagged. You didn't verify. Dr. Ashford's voice rose. You almost killed a senator. Elena stepped back, her job done. She returned to the crash cart, hands steady, face blank. Grace appeared at her side. Nice catch. Elena didn't answer. 30 minutes later, the senator was stable, the correct medications administered, the crisis averted. Dr. Ashford thanked Elena in a voice that sounded like it hurt him to say. Elena nodded once and left the room, but Jake Drummond was already talking to the charge resident, his voice low and urgent. I'm telling you, the system auto-flagged the wrong profile. I followed protocol. If there's an error, it's on whoever entered it. The charge resident frowned. Who entered it? Jake hesitated, then said the only name he could think of. Thorne was at the station earlier. She logs a lot of charts. The lie moved like a virus. By the end of the shift, 3 people had heard it. By the next morning, it was in an email. By the time Marcus Blackwell arrived, it was a fact. Marcus Blackwell did not come to the ER often. When he did, it meant someone important was unhappy. He walked in at 11 p.m. wearing a suit that cost more than most nurses made in a month. His shoes clicked on the tile like a countdown. His face was tight, his jaw set, his eyes scanning the room for a target. Grace saw him first and felt her stomach drop. Who touched the VIP chart? Blackwell's voice carried across the department. Silence. Elena was at the nurse's station sorting IV kits. She didn't look up. She'd learned long ago that eye contact invited confrontation. But Blackwell's shadow fell over her anyway. My board is getting calls, he said, leaning in. Start talking. Elena looked up slowly. Her voice was calm. Sir, the order was entered under the wrong patient profile. It was corrected within minutes. The patient was not harmed. Blackwell's eyes narrowed. Corrected by who? By me. After you entered it wrong in the first place. Elena's face didn't change. I didn't enter it. I caught the error. That's not what I heard. Then you heard wrong. The room held its breath. Blackwell's hand rose, fast. The slap cracked like a gunshot. Elena's head snapped to the side. The impact echoed down the corridor. A metal tray clattered to the floor. The overhead mic, still live, carried the sound into the hallway, into the waiting room, into the records that would later become evidence. Elena didn't fall. She didn't cry out. She stood exactly where she was, her cheek blooming red, a single tear sliding down not from pain, but from the body's involuntary response to shock. You're suspended, Blackwell said, voice shaking now, not with anger, but with the realization that he'd just done something he couldn't take back. Get out. Elena pressed 2 fingers to her cheek. Clinical. Assessing. Her sleeve rode up for half a second, revealing the faded band on her wrist. Number stitched in gray thread. She pulled the sleeve down, turned to the supply cart, and pushed it toward the storage room. Grace stepped forward. Elena. I'm fine, Grace. You're not. I said I'm fine. Elena disappeared into the supply room. The door closed with a soft click. The ER stood frozen. Phones were already out. The video was already uploading. Blackwell looked around the room, saw the faces staring back at him, and turned on his heel. He walked out the way he came, shoes clicking, silence following. Grace found Elena 10 minutes later, sitting on a supply crate staring at nothing. Let me get you ice. Elena shook her head. It'll bruise anyway. You need to file a report. No. Elena, he's the CEO, Grace. Who do you think they'll believe? Grace's hands curled into fists. I'll testify. Everyone saw it. Elena looked up at her, and for the first time, Grace saw something in her eyes that wasn't calm. It was cold. Let it go. I can't just, Grace. Elena's voice was quiet, but it carried weight. Let it go. Grace stared at her, then turned and walked out, her footsteps heavy with anger and helplessness. Elena sat alone in the supply room, surrounded by gauze and tape and sterile instruments. She touched her cheek again. The heat was spreading. By tomorrow, it would be purple. Her phone buzzed. 16 missed calls. She didn't look at the number. She stood, smoothed her scrubs, and walked back into the ER. Because that's what she did. She kept going. The emergency lobby at Riverside Regional never truly quieted, but at 3 in the morning it found a different rhythm. Slower, darker, the kind of quiet that felt like holding your breath. Elena Thorne stood at the ambulance bay doors watching rain streak the glass. Her cheek had darkened to a mottled purple. The bruise spread from her cheekbone to her jaw, a shadow that made people look away when they saw it. Grace Brennan appeared at her elbow holding 2 cups of coffee. She didn't ask if Elena wanted one. She just pressed it into her hands. "You should go home." Elena wrapped her fingers around the cup. The heat felt good. "I'm suspended, not fired." "You're suspended and assaulted. Go home. Sleep. Come back when you're ready." Elena took a sip. The coffee was terrible, but it was warm. "What would I do at home, Grace?" Grace didn't have an answer for that. She'd seen Elena's apartment once when she dropped off a forgotten sweater. Empty walls, no photos, no life outside these walls. "I'll stay until shift change," Elena said. "Then I'll go." Grace knew better than to argue. She squeezed Elena's shoulder and walked back to the nurse's station. Elena stayed at the windows watching the rain, waiting for the sirens that always came. They came at 3:47, 2 ambulances' lights cutting through the rain like knives. The bay doors burst open and cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of blood and diesel fuel. 3 gurneys, 3 soldiers, all young, all broken. The first paramedic was shouting before his feet hit the floor. "3 incoming from Fort Lewis. Vehicle collision on I-5, military transport. 2 critical, 1 combative." Elena moved before she thought. Her body knew what to do, even when her mind told her she was suspended, told her to stay back, told her this wasn't her fight anymore. The first gurney rolled past. Specialist Ryan Caldwell, 23, unconscious, head wrapped in bloody gauze, skin pale as paper. Probable skull fracture. Possible internal bleeding. The monitors screamed. The second gurney followed. Sergeant Michael Hastings, 29. Conscious but gray pelvis, shattered femoral artery compromised. The paramedics' hands were red to the elbows. The third gurney came last, and it was chaos. Corporal Alex Ravencroft, 25, broad across the shoulders muscle, turned to violence. His wrists were restrained, but he fought the straps with animal strength. His eyes rolled white. Foam clung to the corners of his mouth. "He woke up in the rig," the paramedic gasped, struggling to hold the gurney steady. "Started screaming. Ripped out 1 Mars IV. We got another in, but he won't stop. Heart rate's 160. We don't know if it's trauma or something else." Dr. Graham Ashford appeared, hair disheveled, stethoscope swinging. His eyes swept the scene, calculating, categorizing. "Trauma 1 for Caldwell. Trauma 2 for Hastings. 3 for..." He looked at Ravencroft at the way the young man thrashed. "Sedate him. We can't work like this." "His rhythm's unstable," the paramedic said. "If we push heavy sedation, then restrain him better." Ashford's voice was sharp. He turned to the residents. "Move." Elena stood at the edge of the chaos, watching. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was suspended. But her feet wouldn't move. Grace caught her eye from across the room and gave the smallest shake of her head. A warning. "Stay back." Elena stayed back for about 10 seconds. Ravencroft's screaming changed pitch. Words tumbled out, broken and raw. "Not the IED, not the convoy, get them out." The residents hesitated. One fumbled with restraints, another backed away when Ravencroft's arm broke free and swung wild. Ashford's face went red. "Someone control him before..." Ravencroft's hand caught a tray of instruments. Metal clattered across the floor. A scalpel skittered under a cabinet. A nurse yelped and jumped back. Elena moved, not fast, just inevitable. She walked to the head of the gurney, not from the side where hands and feet could reach her, but from behind where his vision was limited and his panic had less fuel. "Excuse me," she said to the resident blocking her path. He didn't move. "Ma'am, you're not cleared to move." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. He moved. Elena placed her hands on either side of Ravencroft's head, not restraining, just anchoring. Her face came into his line of sight, calm and steady. "Corporal," she said. He didn't hear her. He was somewhere else, somewhere burning. Elena's voice dropped lower, not to a whisper, but to something else. Something that carried weight without volume. "Corporal Alex Ravencroft, Grid Tango 9. Route clearance confirmed." The room went silent. Ravencroft's thrashing slowed. His eyes, wild and unseeing, began to focus. "You are CONUS." Elena continued, her tone firm but not harsh. "Continental United States. You are stateside. You are safe." Ravencroft's breath hitched. "Phoenix." The word came out broken. Elena's fingers found a pressure point near the base of his skull, gentle but precise. Not to hurt, to redirect. "That's right, Corporal. I need you to breathe with me. Count with me. 3, 2, 1. He tried. Failed. Tried again. His body began to obey what his mind couldn't process. The monitors stopped screaming. His heart rate dropped from 160 to 140. Still high, but falling. Elena's hand stayed steady. You're not in the convoy. You're in a hospital. Seattle, Riverside General. You are safe. Ravencroft's eyes locked onto hers. Recognition flickered not of her face, but of something else. Something deeper. How do you know Grid Tango 9? He whispered. Elena didn't answer. She looked at Dr. Ashford. He needs fluids. Slow push. His pressure's going to swing when the adrenaline crashes. Ashford stared at her like she'd just spoken another language. Who are you? Elena ignored him. She kept her focus on Ravencroft, kept her voice low and steady. I'm going to step back out, Corporal. You're going to stay calm. You're going to let these people help you. Understood. Ravencroft nodded once sharp and military. Elena stepped back. The room exhaled. Grace appeared at Elena's side, handing her a roll of gauze like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like Elena hadn't just been suspended 6 hours ago. Ashford opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. How did you? He needed an anchor, Elena said, not to fight. A young nurse, Emily Fletcher, 24, and still wide-eyed at everything the ER threw at her, stared at Elena with something close to awe. What language was that Grid Tango 9? Elena's face went carefully blank. Military comms protocol, probably something he heard in training. But you knew it. I read. Elena turned and walked toward the supply room, leaving the questions behind her like smoke. But Grace saw the way Elena's hands shook when she thought no one was looking. Saw the way her jaw tightened when Ravencroft said the word Phoenix. Grace followed her into the supply room and closed the door. Elena, I'm fine. Stop saying that. Grace's voice was gentle but firm. Who are you? Elena's back was turned. She was organizing supplies that didn't need organizing. I'm a nurse. You just spoke classified military codes to a PTSD soldier and brought him down from a panic attack that 3 residents couldn't handle. That's not just a nurse. Elena's hand stilled. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she turned. Her eyes met Grace's, and for the first time, Grace saw something in them she'd never seen before. Not fear, not anger, just exhaustion. Let it go, Grace. I can't. You have to. Grace searched Elena's face, looking for cracks for something that would let her in. But Elena's walls were old and well-maintained. Fine, Grace said. But when you're ready to talk, I'm here. Elena nodded once. Grace left. Alone in the supply room, Elena leaned against the metal shelving and closed her eyes. Her fingers found the fabric band on her wrist, the one she kept hidden under her sleeve. She touched the stitched numbers like a talisman. Delta Saddam, Devetit Votachka, Dva Nula Yedin Chetri. She hadn't spoken those codes in 10 years. Hadn't thought she remembered them. But the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Outside, 2 figures stood in the parking lot beside a black SUV. They'd been there for 3 hours, watching the entrance, tracking every ambulance, every patient, every face that passed through those sliding doors. Major Nathan Cross, 45, 6'2", shoulders like a linebacker, and a scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw lowered a pair of binoculars. That was her, he said. Captain Rebecca Steele, 38, lean and sharp-eyed, typed something into her laptop. Confirmed. Subject used operational protocols with military casualty. Grid Tango 9 was Operation Red Wing Comms, classified 10 years. Nathan's jaw tightened. She's not supposed to know those codes anymore. She was debriefed. Memory wiped isn't protocol, but the codes were supposed to be buried. Rebecca pulled up a file on her screen. A photograph appeared. Younger woman, desert fatigues, face shadowed under a helmet, but the eyes were unmistakable. Below it, lines of text, most of it redacted. Sergeant Elena Thorne, Delta Force Medical Support Operation Red Wing, Helmand Province, 2010 to 2014. Bronze Star with Valor Purple Heart classified commendation. Protect and observe status active, do not engage, do not disclose. Rebecca looked up. The CEO assaulted her 6 hours ago. Whole thing's on video. Observe only is over. Nathan pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd memorized years ago. It rang once. Colonel, it's Cross. We have confirmation. Subject is active and engaging. Protective status has been violated. Requesting authorization to intervene. He listened. His face didn't change, but his knuckles went white around the phone. Understood, sir. We'll maintain position and report. He ended the call and looked at Rebecca. We hold. For now. Rebecca's eyes stayed on the hospital entrance. And if they come for her, Nathan's hand drifted to the weapon holstered under his jacket. Then observe only becomes something else. Inside in a glass-walled office on the 4th floor, Marcus Blackwell got alone with the lights off. His hands shook. He'd watched the video 17 times, watched his own hand rise, watched the impact, heard the sound. His career was built on control, on image, on the careful construction of power, and he just destroyed it in front of cameras. His phone buzzed, a text from the board chair. 3 words, emergency meeting, tomorrow. Blackwell's stomach turned to ice. Another buzz, this one from Diana Merrick, the PR director. She didn't text, she called. He answered. Diana, we have a problem. Her voice was tight. The video's going viral internally. Staff are sharing it. Some are talking to reporters. Kill it. I can't. It's already out. And there's something else. Blackwell's throat went dry. What? I tried to pull Elena Thorne's employee file. Standard background check looking for disciplinary history we can use. But the system's locked. Federal seal. High-level clearance required. What does that mean? It means she's not just a nurse, Marcus. And you just put your hands on someone the government is actively protecting. Blackwell's world tilted. That's impossible. She's nobody. She's someone. And we need to figure out who before this gets worse. The call ended. Blackwell sat in the dark, surrounded by plaques and awards and photographs of himself, shaking hands with people who mattered. Senators, governors, donors. All of it felt very far away now. Downstairs in the records department, a middle-aged woman named Lydia Pemberton sat at her desk staring at her computer screen with growing unease. She'd worked in medical records for 23 years. She knew every file, every system, every protocol. But she'd never seen a seal like this. Employee file Thorne. Elena clearance level, federal access restricted, unauthorized attempts will be logged and reported. She tried her supervisor's login. Denied. She tried the hospital administrator's login. Denied. She'd even tried the CEO's login, and that's when the screen went red and a message appeared. Warning, Federal Protective Directive in effect, further access attempts will trigger investigation, contact Department of Defense. Personnel Recovery Liaison. Lydia's hands trembled as she logged out. She looked around the empty records room, suddenly aware of how alone she was. Whoever Elena Thorne was, she was protected by people who didn't play games. And Marcus Blackwell had just made a very, very big mistake. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The sky was the color of old bruises. Elena stood outside the hospital, having finally left after Grace physically pushed her toward the door. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it for the first time in hours. 23 missed calls, 17 from numbers she didn't recognize, 6 from a blocked number that kept trying. One text message, sent at 4 a.m. Unknown number, we see you, stay inside. Elena stared at the message. Her thumb hovered over the delete button. Instead, she pocketed the phone and walked to her car. At home, she didn't sleep. She sat on the floor of her living room, the wooden box open in front of her. The photograph lay on the carpet, creased and faded. 12 faces. Helmand Province, 2014. She could name every one of them. 7 were dead now. 3 from combat. 4 from what came after. Suicide. Overdose. The slow death of men and women who came home but never really left. Elena touched each face with her fingertip, a ritual she performed every year on the anniversary. But it wasn't the anniversary. It was just a Tuesday in February. She shouldn't have opened the box. But Ravencroft's eyes had looked at her the way her soldiers used to look at her. With hope. With trust. With a desperate need to believe someone could save them. And she'd responded the way she always did. By saving them. Even when it cost her everything. Her phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. This time the message was longer. Sergeant Thorne, this is Colonel Whitmore. We need to talk. It's about Blackwell. It's about what happens next. You're not alone. You never were. Elena read the message 3 times. Then she deleted it. But her hands were shaking when she put the phone down. Outside, the black SUV was parked across the street. Nathan and Rebecca had followed her home, keeping their distance, staying invisible. She got the message, Rebecca said. She deleted it, Nathan replied. Think she'll respond. Nathan watched Elena's apartment window. A shadow moved behind the curtain. No, she's been running for 10 years. Old habits don't break easy. Then what do we do? Nathan's phone buzzed. He looked at it, then showed Rebecca the screen. New orders, 1 line, maintain observation. Prepare for extraction if threatened. Rebecca looked at Nathan. They're escalating. They have to. Blackwell just declared war on someone he doesn't understand. And when people like him get scared, they get dangerous. And if he comes for her again, Nathan's eyes were cold. Then we stopped being observers. Inside her apartment, Elena finally closed the box, locked it, and put it away. She made coffee. She stood at the window. She watched the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and gray, and she waited. Because something was coming. She could feel it in her bones, in the old wounds that ached when the weather changed, in the part of her that never stopped being a soldier, even when she wore scrubs instead of fatigues. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. At Riverside General, the morning shift arrived to find the night shift buzzing with stories. The video of Blackwell's slap had spread beyond the hospital now. Local news had picked it up. Social media was on fire. And in the trauma bay, Corporal Alex Ravencroft lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the face of the woman who'd spoken to him in a language that felt like home. "Phoenix," he whispered to the empty room. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. Outside his door, 2 MPS stood guard. Orders from Fort Lewis. Keep him safe. Keep him quiet. Don't let anyone ask questions. But questions were already being asked. And in a black SUV across the street, 2 federal agents sat in silence, waiting, counting down the hours until everything changed. Because Elena Thorne could run from her past, could bury it under scrubs and silence, and 10 years of trying to forget. But the past doesn't stay buried. Not when 3 generals are about to walk through the door. The morning came cold and gray, the kind of February dawn that made Seattle feel like it was holding its breath. Elena Thorne stood in her kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Her reflection in the window looked back at her bruise dark against pale skin, a mark that told a story she couldn't explain away. She'd been suspended. She should stay home, should let the lawyers and HR and whoever else dealt with these things handle it. But there were patience. There were always patience. And Elena had never been good at staying down. She dressed in clean scrubs, tied her hair back with the same precision she'd learned in the desert, and drove to Riverside General through streets still wet from last night's rain. The hospital rose against the sky like a monument, all glass and concrete, and the weight of lives held in balance. Owen Garrett was at the employee entrance, clipboard in hand, looking like he hadn't slept. When he saw Elena, his face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Surprise, concern, something that might have been respect. "Ms. Thorne." He didn't move to block her. "I heard about what happened." "I'm sure everyone did." Owen shifted his weight, the clipboard hanging loose in his hands. "Administration sent a memo. You're not supposed to be on the premises." Elena met his eyes. "Are you going to stop me, Owen?" He looked at her for a long moment. At the bruise that had spread from her cheekbone to her jaw. At the steady way she stood like she'd been knocked down before and knew exactly how to get back up. At the quiet strength that radiated from her like heat from coals. "No, ma'am," he said quietly. "I'm not." He stepped aside. Elena walked through. The hospital felt different in the morning light. Conversations stopped when she passed. Eyes followed her, some with sympathy, some with curiosity, some with something darker. The video had done its work. Everyone knew. Everyone had seen. The quiet nurse who never caused trouble had been struck by the CEO in front of cameras, and now the whole building hummed with speculation. Grace found her at the nurse's station within 5 minutes, moving fast, her face tight with worry, and something that looked like protective fury. "You shouldn't be here." "Probably not." "Elena," Grace's voice dropped. "Blackwell's looking for you. He's been calling everyone trying to do damage control. His lawyers are already spinning stories." Elena's hands stilled on the supply cart she'd been organizing. "Let them spin. This isn't a joke. He could—" "Grace." Elena turned to face her. "Is Ravencroft stable?" Grace's jaw tightened. She knew that tone, the one that said the conversation was over before it started, the one that meant Elena had already made her decision and nothing would change it. "He's in post-trauma observation. 2 MPs at his door. Fort Lewis locked him down tight. Nobody gets in without clearance." "Can I see him?" "You're suspended." "That's not what I asked." Grace looked at her, then sighed the way people sigh when they know they've already lost. "Room 412, but Elena, if Blackwell finds out." "He won't." Elena's voice was quiet but certain. "And if he does, it won't matter." Grace wanted to ask what that meant, but Elena was already moving toward the elevators, her steps measured and sure like a soldier returning to familiar ground. The 4th floor was quieter. Post-trauma observation was where they put the cases that needed watching, but not the chaos of the ER. Elena moved through the halls like water finding channels, nodding to nurses who recognized her, invisible to those who didn't. Room 412 sat at the end of the corridor. 2 MPS stood outside, young and squared-away uniforms, crisp eyes sharp. They straightened when Elena approached, hands drifting to positions that weren't quite threatening but weren't welcoming either. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area." Elena stopped 5 feet away, hands visible, posture open. "I'm Elena Thorne." I treated Corporal Ravencroft in the ER last night. I wanted to check on his condition. The first MPI, a woman with sergeant stripes and a face that had seen enough to know trouble when it walked up, shook her head. Only authorized personnel. Doctor's orders. I'm a nurse here. You're suspended. The MP's voice wasn't cruel, just factual. We were briefed. Elena nodded slowly. Of course they were. Blackwell would have made sure everyone knew. Is he awake? That's not Phoenix. The voice came from inside the room, raw and urgent, cutting through protocol like a knife. Is that Phoenix? The MPs exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering across their professional masks. The sergeant keyed her radio. Control, we have a situation. Patient is requesting. Let her in. The voice was stronger now, closer to the door, carrying the kind of command that came from battlefield authority. I know that voice. Let her in. The sergeant hesitated, caught between orders and the desperation in a wounded soldier's voice. Then she stepped aside, her hand hovering near her sidearm. 5 minutes. Elena walked into the room. Alex Ravencroft lay in the bed, face bruised purple and yellow left arm, in a cast from shoulder to wrist, monitors beeping their steady rhythm. But his eyes were clear now, focused, the wild panic from last night replaced by something harder and more present. Something that recognized another soldier when he saw one. He looked at Elena like he was seeing a ghost made flesh. It is you, he whispered. I thought I was losing it again. Thought Phoenix was just another hallucination. Elena closed the door, aware of the MPS outside, aware of the weight of this moment. How are you feeling, Corporal? Like I got hit by a truck. He tried to smile. It didn't quite work, the pain too fresh, the memories too close. But alive, thanks to you. The doctors did the work. No, his voice was firm, carrying the certainty of someone who knew the difference between competence and salvation. You did. Grid Tango 9. Phoenix protocols. I know what that means. Elena's face went carefully neutral, the mask she'd worn for 10 years sliding into place. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Ravencroft shifted, wincing, but his eyes never left hers. I served with the 75th Rangers. We had liaisons from Delta Medical. They trained us on field comms, classified stuff, for when things went sideways and normal channels were compromised. Grid Tango 9 was one of them. Echo 7 clearance. Only people who'd know that are Delta operators or the medics who supported them in theater. Elena said nothing, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, memory, things she'd buried deep. You're hurt. Ravencroft continued, his voice dropping to something almost reverent. Phoenix medic, the legend they tell in the barracks when the brass isn't listening. Helmand Province, 2014. Operation Red Wing. You saved 47 soldiers in 72 hours under sustained enemy fire. They gave you a medal they couldn't give you in public because the whole operation was so black it doesn't officially exist. Elena's hands were steady, but her throat had gone tight. You need rest, Corporal. You've been through trauma. Sometimes my mind is fine. His voice cracked. Last night I was back there, in the convoy, watching my guys burn, the smell of diesel and blood and burning flesh. And I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but scream. And then you spoke, not like a nurse, like a commander, like someone who'd been in the fire and knew the way out. You pulled me back, with your voice, with those words. You gave me something to hold on to when I had nothing. Elena looked at him for a long moment, seeing the pain, the gratitude, the desperate need to be understood by someone who'd been where he was. Then she pulled a chair close and sat down, her voice dropping to the low, steady tone she'd used in trauma tents and under mortar fire. What happened to your convoy, Alex? Ravencroft's face went hard, the muscle jumping in his jaw. IED Taliban. At least that's what they told us. But the timing was wrong, the intel was wrong. We were supposed to be on a different road. Someone changed the route at the last minute. Someone who knew exactly when we'd be there and exactly where to place the device. Who changed the route? I don't know, but Fort Lewis is asking questions. CID is involved. JAG is involved. They think it's internal. They think someone in our command structure sold us out to the enemy. He met Elena's eyes. They think someone wanted us dead. Elena absorbed this, her mind clicking through possibilities, through the dark mathematics of betrayal and blood money, old instincts rising like muscle memory she couldn't suppress. Is that why the MPS are here, to protect you or to keep you quiet? Both, probably. Ravencroft's laugh was bitter. They say it's for my protection, but it feels more like it's how I am, like they're afraid of what I might say or who I might say it to. Before Elena could respond, voices rose in the hallway, sharp, authoritative, the kind that made MPS stand straighter and nurses step aside. The door opened. Dr. Graham Ashford walked in white coat, crisp stethoscope gleaming by two men in dark suits that screamed federal agent, not hospital administration, something with more weight behind it. Ashford's face was tight lips pressed into a thin line. Ms. Thorne, you need to leave. Now. Elena stood slowly, taking her time, refusing to be rushed. I was just checking on a patient. You're suspended. You shouldn't be here at all. You're creating a liability issue. Ashford turned to Ravencroft, his tone gentler. Corporal, these gentlemen are from CID. They have questions about the incident. One of the suits stepped forward, mid-40s military haircut, going gray at the temples, eyes that saw everything and gave away nothing. Special Agent Morrison, Army Criminal Investigation Division. Corporal Ravencroft, we need to discuss the events leading up to your convoy's attack. Ravencroft's jaw tightened, his free hand curling into a fist. I already gave my statement 3 times. We need you to give it again, in detail, with timeline specifics. Elena moved toward the door, but Ravencroft's voice stopped her cold. She stays. Morrison turned, his eyes narrowing as he focused on Elena for the first time. Excuse me. Phoenix stays. If you want me to talk, she stays in the room. Morrison's expression shifted from annoyance to calculation. He looked at Elena like he was seeing her for the first time, really seeing her, cataloging details. Phoenix, Elena felt the room shift, felt the weight of that name, that call sign, that life she tried to bury under scrubs and silence, and 10 years of pretending. It's nothing, she said, her voice level. Just something he said when he was confused last night. Didn't sound like confusion. Morrison pulled out his phone, fingers moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. He typed something, waited, his face changing as the response came back. Elena Thorne, Riverside General Hospital. Employed here 3 years as a nurse. Before that, he looked up and his expression was different now. Careful, wary. Before that, you don't exist. No employment records, no credit history, no tax returns, nothing before 2021. It's like you appeared out of thin air. I moved here from out of state, started fresh. Which state? Elena said nothing. Morrison took a step closer, lowering his voice. I've been investigating military personnel for 20 years. I know a ghost when I see one. And you're not just any ghost. You're a protected ghost. The kind that has federal seals on their file and flags that go all the way up the chain to people who scare me. Before Elena could answer, the hospital's PA system crackled to life, the voice tense and urgent. Security alert. All available personnel to the main lobby. Security alert. This is not a drill. Ashford's radio squawked, the voice on the other end rushed and slightly panicked. We have a situation. 3 military officers just walked into the lobby. Full dress uniform. Stars on their shoulders. They're not checking in. They're not asking permission. They're asking for Elena Thorne by name. The room went silent. Morrison looked at Elena, his professional mask slipping for just a moment. You want to tell me what's going on? Elena's face was stone, but her heart was hammering. No. She walked out of the room, moving fast now, the MPS and agents scrambling to follow. The elevator was too slow. She took the stairs, her footsteps echoing in the concrete shaft like drumbeats. Her mind racing through scenarios, through possibilities, through the one truth she couldn't escape. They'd found her. After 10 years of silence, of anonymity, of being nobody, they'd found her. The lobby at Riverside General was designed to be calming. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs, watercolor art on the walls that was supposed to make people feel less afraid of what waited beyond the doors. But there was nothing calming about it now. 3 figures stood in the center of the space, and they didn't belong to this world of fluorescent lights and hand sanitizer dispensers. They were older, 60s at least, but they stood with the kind of posture that never fades. Backs straight as rifle barrels, shoulders squared, faces weathered by decisions that cost lives and saved nations. Full dress uniforms, dark and sharp, heavy with ribbons and medals that told stories of wars fought in places most people couldn't find on a map. Each ribbon represented blood-spilled missions completed, brothers lost. Stars gleamed on their shoulders, catching the light like beacons. 3 stars, 2 stars, 1 star. Lieutenant General Raymond Whitmore, Major General Victoria Hawthorne, Brigadier General Marcus Donovan. They'd cleared a space around themselves without saying a word, their presence creating a gravity that bent the room. Hospital security hovered at the edges, uncertain radios crackling with requests for guidance that wasn't coming. Staff and visitors stared from the periphery, phones out recording, sensing that something unprecedented was happening. Marcus Blackwell stood near the information desk, face pale and shining with sweat, flanked by two board members who looked like they wanted to sink through the floor. He'd been in an emergency meeting when security called, already trying to manage the fallout from the video. Now he stood frozen, watching three people who outranked everyone in the building in ways that had nothing to do with hospital hierarchy. General Whitmore stepped forward when he saw Elena emerge from the stairwell. His eyes tracked her movement across the lobby, taking in the bruise, the scrubs, the way she moved like she was calculating exits even now. "Sergeant Thorne," he said, his voice carried across the marble floor, not loud, but impossible to ignore the voice of a man used to commanding thousands. Elena stopped 20 feet away, every instinct screaming at her to run, to hide, to disappear again. "I'm not in the military." "That's not what your file says." "Then my file is wrong." General Hawthorne, the only woman among them, moved to Whitmore's right. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, her face lined with command and compassion in equal measure. "You're listed as inactive reserve sergeant. You never formally discharged. That means you're still one of ours, whether you wear the uniform or not." "I work here." "You serve here, up to," Hawthorne corrected gently. "There's a difference. Service doesn't end just because you change clothes." The lobby was filling now. Staff poured in from every floor, drawn by rumors and texts and the sheer magnetic pull of something unprecedented happening. Grace pushed through the crowd, her face a mix of shock and dawning understanding. Sarah Kincaid stood near the ER entrance, one hand over her mouth. Jake Drummond, the resident who'd blamed Elena for the senator's chart error, looked like he might be sick. Blackwell found his voice, though it came out strangled. "This is a civilian hospital. You can't just walk in here and what?" General Donovan turned to face him, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "We can't check on one of our soldiers. We can't ensure her safety after she was assaulted by someone who should have known better." Blackwell's face went from pale to gray. "I don't know what you've been told, but we've been told everything." Whitmore's voice was cold enough to frost glass. "We've seen the video 17 times. We've read the incident reports from 4 different sources. We've reviewed Sergeant Thorne's protective status, which you violated when you put your hands on her in anger and in public." "Protective status?" Blackwell's voice cracked, desperation seeping through. "She's a nurse. She's a decorated combat medic who saved 47 lives under sustained enemy fire." Hawthorne cut in her voice like a blade wrapped in silk. "She holds a bronze star with valor and a purple heart. She has a classified commendation from Joint Special Operations Command for actions so critical to national security that the details remain sealed. And she has been under federal protective observation for 10 years because of the sensitive nature of her service." The lobby erupted in whispers, a wave of sound that broke against the walls. Phones lifted higher. Someone gasped. Blackwell swayed like he'd been hit with a hammer. Elena stood perfectly still, her face unreadable, but her hands had curled into fists at her sides. Knuckles white with the effort of not running, not screaming, not breaking. Grace pushed forward until she was close enough to hear every word, close enough to see the truth in Elena's eyes. "Elena," her voice was small, almost childlike. "Is this true?" Elena didn't look at her, couldn't look at her. "Grace, go back to the ER. Is it true, please?" Grace stood there for another moment, tears gathering in her eyes, then slowly backed away, never breaking eye contact, like she was afraid Elena would disappear if she looked away. Whitmore took another step forward, closing the distance, his voice gentling. "Sergeant Thorne, we're here to bring you home. This is my home." "No," Whitmore said, and there was compassion in his tone now. "This is where you've been hiding. There's a difference." Elena's jaw tightened, the muscle jumping. "I'm not hiding, I'm living. There's a difference. By pretending to be someone else, by bearing everything you are under a uniform that isn't yours, by choosing who I want to be instead of being defined by the worst days of my life." The words hung in the air, raw and honest. Hawthorne spoke up, her voice softer but no less firm. "Elena, you don't have to run anymore. We're not here to drag you back to war. We're not here to force you into a uniform. We're here to protect you, to honor you, to make sure what happened last night never happens again to you or anyone like you. I don't need protection. You have a bruise on your face that says otherwise." Elena's hand rose instinctively to her cheek, fingers trembling against the swollen skin, then dropped. "That's not your concern. It became our concern the moment he touched you," Donovan said, his voice hard. "You're under federal protective status. An assault on you is an assault on a national asset. That triggers protocols, investigations, federal charges, Consequences that can't be swept under any rug, no matter how expensive the lawyers. Blackwell made a sound like a wounded animal, his knees buckling. He caught himself on the information desk, his face collapsing into something that looked like panic and denial fighting for control. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. She never said anything. She never. Ignorance, Whitmore said without looking at him, his voice carrying the weight of absolute judgment, doesn't erase the crime. It just makes you a fool as well as a criminal. Two figures appeared at the lobby entrance, moving with the practiced efficiency of people who'd spent careers navigating difficult situations. Nathan Cross and Rebecca Steele, no longer hiding in shadows, no longer observing from black SUVs. They moved through the crowd with practiced ease and positioned themselves on either side of Blackwell, cutting off any escape route. Nathan showed his badge, the gold shield catching the light. Marcus Blackwell, you're being detained for questioning regarding assault on a protected federal asset. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Blackwell's legs gave out completely. He would have fallen if Nathan hadn't caught him by the arm, holding him up with professional detachment. This is insane. This is a misunderstanding. I'll fix this. I'll apologize. You'll do nothing, Rebecca said calmly, producing a set of restraints. Except come with us and answer questions. And if you're very lucky and very smart, you'll call a lawyer before you say another word. They escorted him out, Blackwell's protests fading as the doors closed behind them. The board members scattered like birds before a storm, desperate to distance themselves from the disaster. The lobby descended into controlled chaos, everyone talking at once, security trying to restore order and failing utterly. Through it all, Elena stood frozen at the center of a storm she hadn't asked for, hadn't wanted, couldn't stop. The eye of a hurricane that had been building for 10 years. Whitmore crossed the remaining distance between them, his footsteps echoing on the marble. When he was close enough to speak, without shouting, close enough to see the barely controlled panic in her eyes, he did something Elena didn't expect. He saluted. Sharp, formal, precise. The kind of salute reserved for heroes and the honored dead. Hawthorne and Donovan followed suit, their hands snapping to their foreheads in perfect unison, three generals honoring a sergeant who'd never wanted recognition. The lobby fell absolutely silent. Elena stared at them. Her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. 10 years she'd been running. 10 years she'd been someone else. 10 years she'd tried to forget the weight of those stars that salute that life, where every decision meant someone lived or died. Her hand rose slowly, almost against her will, trembling. Not a salute. She wasn't in uniform, wasn't active, had no right. But her hand pressed flat against her chest over her heart, the civilian gesture of respect and recognition. Whitmore lowered his hand and his voice was gentle now. We'd like you to come with us, Elena. Just to talk. No obligations, no pressure, no cameras unless you want them. Just a conversation between soldiers. And if I say no, then we respect that. But Elena, you should know there are people who want to honor what you did, who want to tell your story with your permission, who want to make sure you're not forgotten by the nation you bled for. I don't want to be remembered. Why not? Elena's voice dropped, barely audible, raw with pain she'd carried for a decade. Because remembering means going back. And if I go back, even in my mind, I'll never come forward again. I'll be trapped there forever with the faces of the people I couldn't save. The confession hung in the air, more naked than she'd been with anyone in years. Hawthorne stepped closer and her voice carried the weight of someone who understood. You don't have to go back to be honored. You don't have to wear a uniform to be recognized. You don't have to relive your trauma to acknowledge your triumph. You just have to stop pretending you're not who you are. That's all. Just stop pretending. Before Elena could respond, before she could run or break or surrender, a small voice cut through the tension like a bell. Miss Elena. The crowd parted. Kyle Whitfield, 9 years old, asthma inhaler clipped to his belt, like a badge holding his mother's hand, stared up at Elena with wide eyes full of confusion and something that might have been awe. Linda Whitfield looked apologetic, embarrassed to be intruding on whatever this was. I'm so sorry. We came for his follow-up appointment. Kyle insisted on finding you when he heard your name on the intercom. Kyle pulled free from his mother's grip and walked straight to Elena. No fear, no hesitation. Just the pure faith of a child who'd been saved and remembered exactly who had done the saving. Are you a soldier? He asked, his voice clear in the silence. Elena looked down at him, and for the first time since the generals walked in, her face softened, the armor cracking. I was, a long time ago. My teacher says soldiers are heroes. She says they protect people. Some are heroes. Some just try their best and hope it's enough. Kyle reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, edges worn from being carried around for days. I drew you something. After you helped me breathe when I thought I was going to die. He unfolded it carefully like it was precious. Crayon on construction paper. A woman with dark hair surrounded by flames, but the flames weren't burning her. They were lifting her up. They were wings, a phoenix rising. Mommy told me phoenix birds come back from fire stronger. Kyle said, his voice full of the absolute certainty of children who haven't learned to doubt yet. That's you. You came back from somewhere bad, and now you help people not be scared. Lena took the drawing with trembling hands, her vision blurring. She stared at it for a long moment, at the simple lines and bright colors, at the hope rendered in crayon. Then she crouched down so she was eye level with Kyle so he could see the tears she'd been holding back finally breaking free. Thank you, she whispered, her voice cracking. This is the best thing anyone's ever given me. Better than any medal. I'm going to keep it forever. Kyle beamed with pride. Then, with the unself-conscious affection of childhood, he hugged her, quick and fierce, his small arms tight around her neck. You're my hero, he whispered in her ear. Even if you're sad. Especially because you're sad, but you help people anyway. Then he pulled back and ran back to his mother, who was crying openly now. Linda mouthed thank you and led him away, but not before Kyle turned and waved his smile bright enough to light the whole lobby. Elena stood slowly still, holding the drawing like it might dissolve if she let go. When she looked at the generals, something in her face had changed. The walls were still there, but they had cracks now. Light was getting through. You want to honor me, she said, her voice steadier now. Yes. Then let me do it my way. Whitmore's eyebrows rose slightly. What way is that? Elena looked around the lobby, at the staff who'd seen her as invisible, as weak as someone to be dismissed. At the residents who'd blamed her for mistakes they made. At Grace, who was crying and smiling at the same time. At the hospital that had become her refuge and her prison in equal measure. I'll accept the recognition, the truth, the medals I never wanted and the story I never wanted told. I'll do interviews if that's what you need. I'll stand on stages and let people stare at me and call me a hero, even though I don't feel like one. She paused, gathering herself. But I'm not coming back to active duty. I'm not putting the uniform back on. I'm staying here, and I'm going to build something that matters more than any mission I ran in Helmand. What kind of something? Hawthorne asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. A training program. Combat trauma protocols for civilian medical staff. Real training. Not theory classes that don't mean anything. Not PowerPoint presentations about triage. Real hands-on training for when everything goes to hell and people's lives depend on what you do in the next 30 seconds. Elena's voice grew stronger, more certain. I saved 47 soldiers because I knew what I was doing when everyone else was panicking, because someone trained me to make impossible decisions under fire. How many more lives could I save by teaching others to do the same? How many nurses and paramedics and doctors freeze up because no one ever taught them how to handle real chaos? Whitmore looked at Hawthorne, then at Donovan. Some wordless communication passed between them, the silent language of people who'd worked together long enough to read each other's thoughts. We'll support it, Whitmore said. Funding, resources, equipment, access to military medical protocols that are usually restricted, whatever you need to make it work. I don't want military oversight. I don't want brass telling me what I can and can't teach. You'll have complete autonomy, but you'll have our backing, our resources, and our credibility when you need it. Elena nodded once, sharp and decisive. Then we have a deal. On one condition, Hawthorne added, you stop hiding. You use your real name, your real story, your rank, your commendations. You let people know who you are and what you've done and what you're capable of. No more ghost, no more pretending to be someone you're not. Elena's jaw tightened, but after a long moment she nodded. Okay, I'll stop hiding. The generals saluted again, then turned and walked out with the same precision they'd walked in, with leaving Elena standing in the center of the lobby with a child's drawing clutched in her hands and the weight of 10 years just beginning to lift from her shoulders. Grace reached her first, pulling her into a fierce hug that Elena this time returned without hesitation. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, Elena whispered into Grace's shoulder. I'm sorry I lied to you for 3 years. I'm sorry I didn't see it, Grace replied, her voice thick. I'm sorry you felt like you had to hide who you were just to feel safe. They stood like that for a long moment, two women holding each other up while the hospital swirled around them. What happens now? Grace asked when they finally pulled apart. Elena looked at the drawing and her hands at the phoenix rising from flames, wings spread wide and fearless. Now, she took a shaky breath. Now I stop running. Now I stop pretending. Now I do what I should have done years ago. What's that? Elena's smile was small but real. I rise. 6 months pass like water finding its level, like storms giving way to calmer seas. The chaos of revelation gave way to something steadier, something that looked like purpose taking root and growing strong. The fourth floor of Riverside General, once slated for closure due to budget cuts, had been transformed. The Combat Trauma Training Center occupied 5,000 square feet of space, filled with state-of-the-art simulation equipment, medical supplies organized with military precision, and the controlled chaos of people learning to save lives under pressure. The walls were lined with photos. Not of Elena, she'd refused that, but of graduates. Nurses who'd gone on to save lives in mass casualty events. Paramedics who'd stopped bleeding at accident scenes. Doctors who'd finally learned to work as teams instead of hierarchies when seconds mattered. Elena stood at the front of a classroom facing 30 medical professionals. Nurses, paramedics, residents, EMTs, some from Riverside, some from other hospitals across Washington and Oregon, some from as far as California and Arizona, drawn by reputation and word of mouth and the quiet knowledge that something revolutionary was happening here. She wore scrubs, same as always, but now a patch on her shoulder read Director, CTTC, in simple block letters. Her hair was still pulled back tight. Her eyes were still gray, but she didn't move like a ghost anymore. She moved like someone who'd found her place and intended to defend it. Most of you will never see combat, Elena said, her voice carrying easily through the room, trained by years of speaking over helicopter rotors and artillery fire. But someday, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, you'll face a situation where everything goes wrong, where the patient is dying faster than you can think, where protocol doesn't work and the equipment fails and you have to make a choice that no one prepared you for. She paused, letting the weight of that sink in, watching their faces. I'm here to teach you how to make that choice and how to live with it after, how to save lives when it seems impossible, how to keep going when you want to quit, how to be the steady hand in the storm. A young nurse in the front row, barely out of school, raised her hand. Ma'am, is it true you saved 47 people in 3 days? Yes. How is that even possible? Elena's face was calm, but her eyes held something deeper, something earned in blood and fire. By refusing to let them die, even when it would have been easier, even when I was exhausted and hurt and wanted to quit, you just keep going. You find something inside yourself that's stronger than the fear and the doubt. That's not a secret I can teach you. That's something you have to discover when the moment comes. But I can give you the tools to make that discovery possible. After class, Grace found Elena in the small office that had become her command center. Whiteboards covered with training schedules. Stacks of medical journals with pages dog-eared and highlighted. A framed photo new of the original Delta medical team from 2014. 12 faces young and determined, half of them gone now. Elena had finally found the courage to display them. You're good at this, Grace said, leaning against the doorframe. Elena looked up from her laptop where she was reviewing applications from the next training cohort. At what teaching, leading, being yourself without apologizing for it. Elena's mouth curved, not quite a smile, but closer than it used to be. Still feels strange, like I'm wearing someone else's skin. Strange bad or strange good? Just strange. Elena closed the laptop. Grace, I never thanked you properly for not giving up on me, for not running when you found out who I really was. You made that easy. Grace sat down in the chair across from the desk. You want to know what Jake Drummond said about you yesterday? Elena's face went neutral. Not particularly. He said you're the best teacher he's ever had, that you're the reason he didn't quit medicine after what happened. He wants to apologize to you properly. He's been trying for weeks, but he's terrified you won't forgive him. Elena was quiet for a moment, remembering the young resident who'd blamed her, who'd nearly cost her everything. Send him in. Grace's eyebrows rose. You sure? I'm sure. Grace left. A minute later, Jake Drummond appeared in the doorway looking like a man about to face execution. He'd lost weight. His eyes were shadowed. His hands twisted together nervously. Sergeant Thorne, Elena, he swallowed hard. Ma'am, Elena is fine. Sit down, Jake. Jake sat perched on the edge of the chair like he might need to run. I wanted to say I'm sorry for what I did, for blaming you when it was my mistake. I was scared and stupid, And I nearly destroyed your life because I couldn't admit I'd screwed up. His voice cracked. You didn't deserve any of it. And I've spent 6 months trying to figure out how to make it right, and I still don't know how. Elena studied him, 28 years old, arrogant once humbled now. She'd seen that transformation before in young soldiers who thought they knew everything until reality taught them otherwise with bullets and blood. You made a mistake, Elena said, her voice even. A bad one that had serious consequences. But you owned it eventually. That matters. Does it? I almost got you fired. But you didn't. And now you have a choice. You can spend the rest of your career feeling guilty and letting it eat you alive. Or you can learn from it. Get better. Make sure you never make the same mistake twice. Make sure you never let fear turn you into someone who hurts others to save yourself. Jake looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. I want to make it right. Then learn. Sign up for the advanced trauma course. Show up. Work hard. Become the kind of doctor who deserves the trust patients give you. She gestured to a chair. And stop apologizing. I forgave you months ago. Now you need to forgive yourself. Jake's breath came out in a rush relief, washing over his face like rain. Thank you. Thank you. I'll sign up today. I'll work harder than anyone. Jake. Elena's voice was gentle. Just be better. That's enough. He nodded hard, not trusting his voice, and left before the tears could fall. That evening, Elena returned to her apartment. It looked different now. Not much. She'd never be the type for clutter or decoration. But there were small changes. A few photos on the wall, the original Delta team, Grace and her at the training center opening ceremony, Kyle's Phoenix drawing, professionally framed and hanging in a place of honor above her desk. The wooden box sat on her desk unlocked for the first time in months, no longer hidden in the closet like a shameful secret. The old patch burned and faded rested next to a new one that had arrived 3 months ago. Same design, crimson phoenix rising from flames. But this one was clean, bright, whole. Unburned, a symbol not of what she'd lost, but of what she'd become. A package had arrived that morning, Federal Express. No return address, but the weight and shape were familiar. Inside, nested in black velvet, a letter on official letterhead. Sergeant Elena Thorne, your service to this nation was classified for reasons of national security and operational necessity. The missions you ran, the soldiers you saved, the blood you spilled in defense of others, all of it happened in shadows because that's where it had to happen. But your sacrifice was never forgotten. The soldiers you saved remember. Their families remember. The command structure remembers. We remember. You have chosen a new mission, teaching the next generation to do what you do, to be what you are. We honor that choice. It takes as much courage to teach as it does to fight, perhaps more. Enclosed is the commendation we could not give you publicly in 2014. You have earned the right to know its contents, even if you never choose to display it. Once a phoenix, always a phoenix, wherever you choose to rise. With profound respect, General Raymond Whitmore, United States Army. Elena opened the small mahogany box that had come with the letter. Inside, on black velvet, a medal gleamed under the lamplight. The Defense Superior Service Medal, one of the highest peacetime awards, with a small phoenix emblem added to the ribbon. Beneath it, a certificate with words that blurred as tears filled her eyes. For extraordinary service in a classified capacity under conditions of extreme danger. Sergeant Elena Thorne displayed exceptional courage, medical expertise, and leadership during Operation Red Wing, saving 47 coalition forces personnel over a 72-hour period while under sustained enemy fire. Her actions represent the highest ideals of military service and devotion to duty. Elena touched the medal once, feeling the weight of it, the reality of it. Then she closed the box gently and set it on her desk next to the patches old and new. She didn't need to wear it, didn't need to display it. Knowing it existed, knowing someone had bothered to write down what she'd done was enough. Her phone buzzed, a text from Grace. Turn on Channel 7, you need to see this. Elena grabbed her remote and turned on the television. The local evening news was running a feature story, and her stomach dropped when she saw the banner. Local hero from combat medic to teaching the next generation. The camera showed footage of the training center. Elena teaching, her face serious and focused. Students practicing on mannequins. Testimonials from graduates who'd used the training to save lives in real emergencies. The anchor's voice carried over the footage. The Combat Trauma Training Center at Riverside General has trained over 200 medical professionals in its first 6 months. The program, directed by Sergeant Elena Thorne, a decorated combat medic and Bronze Star recipient, has received national attention for its innovative approach to emergency medicine. The camera cut to an interview with Dr. Ashford, who'd initially doubted her. Sergeant Thorne has revolutionized how we approach trauma training. In the 6 months since the program began, Riverside General's survival rates in critical trauma cases have increased by 18%. That's not just numbers. That's lives. That's families who didn't have to bury someone. She's given us something we didn't know we were missing. Elena watched in silence as the segment continued. Testimonials from nurses, from paramedics, from a mother whose son had been saved by a graduate of Elena's program. From Kyle, now a minor celebrity, holding up his phoenix drawing for the camera and explaining in 9-year-old wisdom that Miss Elena teaches people to not be scared when scared people need help. The segment ended with footage of Elena. She didn't remember this being filmed, standing in front of a class, her voice clear and certain. Service doesn't end when you take off the uniform. It transforms. It finds new channels. What I learned in war, I teach in peace. That's not a downgrade. That's evolution. Elena turned off the TV. She didn't need to hear more. Her phone rang immediately. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her. Hello. Sergeant Thorne, this is Colonel Reeves, 75th Ranger Regiment. The voice was military professional, but warm. I'm calling about Corporal Alex Ravencroft. He completed his PTSD treatment last month and has been cleared for limited duty. He's asked permission to volunteer at your training center. Says he owes you his life twice over and wants to give back. Elena's throat tightened with emotion she didn't try to hide anymore. Tell him yes. Tell him we'd be honored to have him. Tell him he doesn't owe me anything, but if he wants to help others, we'll teach him how. Will do, ma'am. And Sergeant, the colonel's voice softened. Thank you for not forgetting what you learned, for teaching it to others, for showing the younger generation what the old guard was made of. We're proud of you. The call ended. Elena stood at her window looking out at Seattle. The city lights stretched to the horizon, each one a life, a story, a chance to make a difference. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who'd finally stopped hiding. The bruise from Blackwell's slap had faded months ago, but she could still see it in her mind's eye sometimes. A reminder, not of weakness, but of the moment when everything changed. Her phone buzzed one more time, a text from an unknown number. Thank you for teaching me to breathe. I haven't had an attack in 4 months. Kyle. Elena smiled, genuine and unforced, and typed back a response. Proud of you, kiddo. Keep being brave. She set the phone down and looked at Kyle's drawing on the wall. The phoenix rising from flame's wings spread, waiting, fearless and free. She'd spent 10 years trying to be invisible, trying to be no one, trying to forget the fire that had forged her into something stronger than she'd ever wanted to be. But some fires don't go out. They just wait for the right moment to burn again. And when they do, they light the way for others. Elena Thorne wasn't hiding anymore. She was teaching, building, leading, rising. She walked to her desk and opened her laptop. The screen showed a list of applications for the next training cohort. 200 applications for 30 spots. Nurses from across the country, paramedics, EMTs, doctors, all wanting to learn from the woman who'd saved 47 lives when death seemed certain. She began reviewing files, making notes, selecting the next generation of people who would carry forward what she'd learned in hell and refined in peace. Outside her window, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, phoenix colors. She worked late into the night the way she used to work in trauma tents and field hospitals, driven by the same mission she'd always had. Save lives, teach others to save lives, refuse to let the darkness win. She was Elena Thorne. She was Phoenix. And she was finally truly exactly where she was meant to be. The screen faded slowly to black, the image lingering for a moment before white text appeared in elegant serif font. The Combat Trauma Training Center has trained over 500 medical professionals in its first 3 years. Graduates have saved an estimated 1,200 lives in critical situations. Elena Thorne continues to serve at Riverside General Hospital. Marcus Blackwell served 18 months for assault and ethics violations. He is no longer employed in healthcare. Corporal Alex Ravencroft completed PTSD treatment and now serves as assistant director at the training center. Kyle Whitfield is 10 years old. He still draws phoenixes. He wants to be a paramedic when he grows up. A final pause, then one last card. Service doesn't end, it transforms. Sergeant Elena Thorne, the end. The screen fades to complete black. But before the credits roll, Elena's voice comes through one final time, not narrating, just speaking directly to the audience, intimate and honest. They ask me if I'm a hero. I don't know how to answer that. The people I saved, they're the heroes. They survived. They went home. They rebuilt lives from ashes. All I did was give them a chance. That's not heroism. That's just refusing to give up when giving up would be easier. If that makes me a hero, then every nurse working a double shift is a hero. Every paramedic who shows up to the worst day of someone's life is a hero. Every person who chooses to help when they could walk away is a hero. I didn't do anything special. I just did what needed doing. And now I teach others to do the same. Because the world needs more people who refuse to walk away. More people who rise from their own ashes and help others rise too. That's what Phoenix means. Not that you survive the fire, but that you come back from it stronger and use that strength for others. If I'm a hero, it's only because I learned that lesson. And now I'm trying to teach it to everyone who will listen. Her voice fades. The screen goes black. The story ends. But somewhere in a hospital in Seattle, a woman who was once a soldier continues her mission. Not with weapons, but with wisdom. Not in combat, but in compassion. Still fighting, still saving, still rising. Once a phoenix, always a phoenix.